Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Danny James. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to blend in objects and images to text in order to make it more eye-catching. On my desktop, as you can see, I have a few examples. This is one of the texts that I created on Photoshop. I played around with a few images to come up with this, so it doesn't have to be by the script, but I'm going to be showing you my thought process and how I navigated these examples. You can see how immense and powerful the change is whenever you add image or text to your objects in a clever way. I also have another example. You can see how plain and blank the text looks and how it changes as soon as we've added a few objects which don't really send a message, but they just make it look amazing. For the first example, I'm going to be working with this dark colored background, so I just prefer to use something which is darkish because the text you're going to be using should be mostly white, but you can play around and see what you get best. I'll add my text, and what you'll notice instantly is that I won't place all the text in one layer. If it's the word big, I'll try to type them separately so that they can be in different layers. And the reason I separated these letters is because we shall be working with groups to figure out what works best, and you'll find out why in a short bit. So at least I have the texts centrally shaped, and we can now begin on working on these. I'll begin by disabling the other layers so that you can work with one layer first, in this case the letter B. What I did, I have a folder which I have saved these textures I have downloaded from the website unsplash.com, and you can find several things. You just have to know what you want to get. I went to unsplash.com and typed something as simple as popsicle or candy cane. You see there are several examples, and I found this one which we're going to be using. You can decide on the quality you want to download, but a medium quality does the work already. You can search things like coffee, mango, just literally anything, and you might find a photo which you can blend well into your text. Right now, I'll drag this image into Photoshop. I'll place it slightly above the letter B. I'll accept the transformation qualities. I want to reduce the opacity so that I can know where I'm trying to go with this. I feel like this will be a great start. What you want to do, I'll reset the opacity back to 100% for this one. I want to hold shift. I'm holding shift on my windows and clicking the two layers, B, the letter B, and the image that we just downloaded from the website. We're going to group them, hit Ctrl G, and we can name this group B so that it can be easier to reference. What I first do, I'll make a duplicate of this image, so I'll hit Ctrl J, and we now have two copies of the same thing. I've disabled this one above so that we can follow along. I'll right click on this layer and create a clipping mask. If you don't know how a clipping mask, what it does is that it ensures that the contents of this image, they will appear where the contents of the layer below appear. So it will not appear as an entire image, but it will only appear around the letter. Having created the clipping mask with our layer below, we can now start playing around with the layer above so that we can see what we're going to be doing. I'll re-enable the layer. Let's disable everything so that it can be easy to follow through. I want to make a selection so that I can remove the background from this layer, and you can have everything else except this background. You can grab a quick selection tool, make the brush bigger, the selection tool bigger, and choose the area around this candy. With the selection, we'll invert this selection using Ctrl Shift and I so that we can select everything apart from this inside part and hit delete. So it should bring such a prompt because we haven't rasterized the layer. I'm going to rasterize it and hit delete once again. Hit Ctrl D to remove the matching ants, and now we can re-enable the other layers, but not yet. And now what I want to do, I want to add a negative mask. A negative mask means that I'll hold Alt while clicking this area to have a black place to paste on. Now I'll re-enable the other layers and you can see what you can do now. I'll bring up my brushes. The hardness and flow could be at 43% or higher, but I want to work with just a simple figure. We'll select parts of this candy which you'd like to be involved in the picture, and I want to drag the small stick that we had, and that way I can add it into the picture. Already it makes a huge difference, and I'll avoid having the items get into the spaces which define the letter. I can go right behind and add something small like that. I can leave it somewhere like here. I don't want it to go around, so I'll delete this area. So it's a matter of you looking at the picture and seeing what do you really want to add in, because it doesn't have to be necessarily to the textbook as I'm doing it. If we compare what this letter looked like, it looked like this, and then we added a clipping mask of the items of the image that we just downloaded, and then we added a few more elements from that after we did a mask on it. Now we're going to be doing the same but for the letter I. Also, whatever image that you choose to add onto the text, it's also good to account for the shape of the text and if it will contribute to making it look better, or it might make the user not be able to read your text. In the example that I showed you, I used the picture of this pineapple, so I'll drag it into my Photoshop right there. I'll accept this transformation. I'll reduce the opacity so that I can see where I want to be placing this. I want to place it somewhere like that way. I'll return the opacity back to 100%. Again, group the two layers, the letter I and the new image that we just brought in. Ctrl G so that you can group them. I'll name the layer I, and now let's open it and make a few changes. Let's disable these other letters so that you can focus on these for now. I'll make a duplicate of the same using Ctrl J to make a duplicate. I'll also hide the visibility for it. On the layer below, as we did previously, we can right click and create our clipping mask. And on the image above, as we did, I want to make a selection of the subject so that I'll avoid the background. I'll again go for this quick selection tool. Doesn't have to be a perfect mask. Yes, something sketchy will still work because it doesn't have to be shown all over. I'll hit Ctrl-Shift-I to invert the selection and hit delete. As it happened previously, we have not rasterized the layer, so we cannot make such an edit. Again, rasterize it, hit delete once again, and it should be done. From this layer, hold Alt and then create a negative mask for it. Now what's remaining is for us to come in with a brush tool and decide what areas we want to add on to. My foreground color, I need a white so that you can paint into this. I'll see if I add just the bottom part of the pineapple or the upper part. We're already done with this. And if we look at the two layers, the letter B and the letter I, they've already changed immensely. I can see this area looks choppy, but it's because it did not take so much time with the selection tool. But I'll make a separate tutorial to show you how to use the selection tool and to make a proper mask to every object. Now let's work on the letter G. In this letter, I used a picture of a coffee, where can I find it? It's right here. And what I did, I dragged it into my Photoshop the same way, placed it on top, scaled it down quite a bit, accepted those changes, and then we reduced the opacity so that you can position it how we really want to. I'll make it a little bit bigger, somewhere like that. I'll accept this, revert the opacity back to 100%, and as we've done previously, we'll group these ones. I'm holding Shift, clicked on the two layers, hit Ctrl G, and let's name this letter G. Again, duplicate it using Ctrl J, hide it, and then work on the layer beneath, right click on it, and then create a clipping mask. we already have a texture of what we are working on, and already it looks good. If we try to look at the entire word, we have something very good developing. And in this particular example, I went a step higher. What I did was, for this layer, I did not actually make a selection of the coffee only, but what I did is that I made a negative mask, as we've been doing. I made a negative mask. I took my brush tool, I set my flow to 100%, I set the hardness to 100%, and I made the circle small. Right around the letter I went clicking to make it give that rustic look. I can undo all that, and then you can play with different brush sizes. I'll use a bigger one right here, and then use a smaller one, and then smaller one, and then smaller one, and then you can increase the size quite a bit, and then increase the size more. You can see where we are heading with this, and then you can make the final bigger, or you can also leave it out. Such small tricks make the effect come a long way, and you can see right away we have something appealing and eye-catching. I'll open another Photoshop file and we'll do one more example to give you a better insight of what we're doing. The advantage of making this text layer separately, let me go back to what we did here previously. Like in the example of letter I, we could, for example, make it even bigger if we wanted to. And these are the things that you couldn't do if all of these items were in one layer, and that's why we couldn't even make such a grouping where we could make further selections. Now back to this thing, let's make this letter V somehow a little bit lower. We can make it even bigger, and letter Y and letter I, they can be the same. For the letter I, I'll drag a picture of candy, something like this one. I love this one. It has a white background. That's better to work on because my letter is already white in color. So it's even better to go for pictures which have a white background behind them. Let's hit accept this. I'll change the opacity and then see what I'm trying to position. Somewhere like this is okay. I'll drag the opacity back to 100%, and as we've done in the previous examples, we'll group all these using Ctrl G and then name it letter I. As you have been doing, I'll duplicate this layer, this image, disable the first one, and on this one I'll right click and create a clipping mask. We have some segments of it appearing, and now we are working on this upper one. I'm going to hold Alt and create a negative mask. And now all you have to do is come with a brush tool. With my foreground set to white, I'm going to be adding a few elements and see what really works and what doesn't. Okay. You can see instantly why it becomes very hard. It's because you haven't made a selection of these. So it has a white background on it. So let's delete this layer mask. And on this one above, let's disable everything else. And on this one, we'll make a selection just as we have been doing. Quick selection, doesn't have to be perfect. And let's re-enable everything else. And on this one, hold Alt and create that negative mask. And now it's a matter of coming with a brush tool and determining what you want to bring into your frame. I'll reduce my flow and hardness, but let me see what 100% gives me. I think it's sketchy, but I'm loving what I can see. I leave it there. If we are to make any changes, we'll come back to it. And now it's time to work on the letter V. And for the letter V, I'm going to be dragging another picture. In this case, I want to use something like a flower. Let me drag this flower into the frame. I'll make it smaller. Accept these ones, the transformation, reduce the opacity, and place the flower where I feel I might get something good from it. Like that. The opacity back to 100%. Let's disable the first one that we did so that you can see what you're doing. Let's group these as usual. Hit Ctrl G. Let's name this letter V. And in this group, we make a duplicate of the flower, hide the visibility. On the layer below, right click, create a clipping mask. On the layer above, let's disable that now. On the layer above, let's get a selection of the flower using a quick selection tool. I'm sure you can notice there are certain steps which are kind of repetitive, and that's how easy it is. I'll hit Ctrl Shift I, press delete, but I have to rasterize this layer this time round. I'll hit delete, Ctrl D to remove the matching ants, and let's re-enable these other ones. For this layer, hold Alt, make a negative mask, come with a brush tool, and now it's time to decide what we want to add into this frame. I'll come to this side and see how it looks like. You can even leave it at that. I'm not really sure about leaving something in between. Let's add it. Let's see what it looks like. Now if we have the full flower, it doesn't look very good. I'll delete some of its contents, like in the middle, and let's leave it as that. And for the last letter, let's drag something else that you can work on. Let's try this flower. So that's it guys, all you have to do is just play around with the quick selection tool and the masking, and you might find something visually interesting coming up. And if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Kindly share the link to your friends or people who you know might enjoy this kind of content, and let me see you next time, and remember to stay creative.